there's a lot of implications as to what that means, and we just need to give it its due process. And I don't think we've really done that thus far. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So the next speaker on the issue is Councilor Sabrina Wheeler. You came on the screen. Did you want to add anything? Oh, sorry. Councilor Zondervan is up. Councilor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I did want to briefly respond to the previous comments. I'm a little bit, as you know, we did have extensive conversations in the Public Safety Committee, both on just response as well as alternative traffic enforcement, as well as demilitarization. So, you know, we have talked extensively about areas that we want to see changed. And the policy order last year that asked for a reduction in the police department made it very clear, outlined specifically where we would allocate those funds. So I'm not sure in what sense we would say that we haven't had these conversations. We didn't have them in the Finance Committee, and it would have been better to do that, but we nonetheless had those conversations form in the Public Safety Committee and elsewhere, as well as in the community overall. In terms of, you know, salary obligations and so forth, which are not so easy to cut, I understand all of that. We can choose to not fill vacant positions. We can choose to shrink the overall footprint police force, which is what our community has called for. We can shrink some of the equipment and the weapons that we are buying, which again our community has called for. And we're not seeing any of those things being proposed. We're seeing, again, increases. And I appreciate that, you know, the police department is spending less than is in. They're spending what they're spending and asking for increases each year above that. The opposite of what the community is asking for. The community is asking for less policing and for more services with housing, with economic opportunity, with mental health and other domestic crises. That's where the investment's going, not in continued policing of the form that we have seen for some decades. And, you know, I'm just responding to that not coming through. Both no conversations about the budget over the course of the year in the Finance Committee, and even now with the budget before us, there's no call for a decrease in policing and a decrease in spending on policing. So, quick questions. One is on the training, travel and training budget, and to know if there was any overseas training that was being paid for by that budget line item. Thank you. And also, in terms of the overtime budget, I know that some of that pays for the traffic details and some of it presumably for events. Have you seen any reduction in the overtime expenditures because of COVID, and are we making any adjustments to that in the budget?
Through the chair, now with an unacceptably high number of vacancies, both in sworn and professional staff, and continuing to operate with the high number of vacancies, it's unsound fiscally, even because it doesn't even permit us to make sound projections on overtime. But overtime, we always have to backfill vacant spots because of mandatory, to make sure that we're up to mandatory minimum staffing levels. Look at FY21. Our backfill overtime ballooned 40% from up to $1.4 million. It's not counting any COVID-related monies, which we spent over $1 million on also, but those monies were paid for out of the CARE Act. But we're operating with fees that really threaten the stability of the department. Vice Mayor Mallon on the previous question alluded to the fact that we procedural justice informatics officer, but the truth of the matter is that candidate backed out over the uncertainty of what this body might budget, believing that if cuts were to be made, that civilian positions would likely go first. In fact, our top two candidates back reason. So these actions that threaten to negatively impact the department's budget, even if they don't happen, they don't simply dissipate in the abstract. They real world identifiable negative consequences. So, you know, I would speak to your whole soliloquy, but I'm not. But we're operating at extremely high vacancies right now.
Thank you. And to believe that particularly with regards to traffic details, that's part of the collective bargaining agreement. Fortunately, requires police officers to conduct those when in fact there's no actual need for that to be. And I don't believe we ever got an updated collective bargaining agreement inspired in 2020. So any updates on that agreement and whether we are continue to require traffic details to be conducted by police officers?
I believe the latest agreement is online. That's what I was told, whatever that is. And yes, we will continue to have police, and the commissioner can talk far why it is important to have them conducting those. But I think, again, the plan we have in place is not only to have them on details, but it also provide safety to our community. And I don't want to underestimate in the middle of COVID it's had to continue to make this city safe. And I think, you know, I have not heard the cries of 118,000 people or eliminate police officers. What we have heard is we need to try to provide the services differently. And that's a big difference. I do think it's unfair to say that the cry is to eliminate police officers. I have not heard that in a population of 118. What we have heard is, and what we're working, how can we provide service better and differently? And both myself and the commissioner have worked with Councilor Simmons and Councilor McGovern in the committee to rest that, and will recommend a plan that does that. But that doesn't mean eliminating police officers.
And to piggyback on what the manager said through the chair, the U.S. said that only 18% of the population favors defunding the police. And I've heard quite the opposite, you know, traffic details. I just want to point out that the reason why officers statutorily in many states are required on traffic details is because of the wisdom of having the police officer there as it pertains to increased public safety. And I think that there's a common misconception that if you officers with civilians, that the price goes down. One, the city doesn't pay it, the vendor pays for the officers, but a flag man, or it should rightfully be called, is really nominally cheaper than a police officer. And I mean too cheaper than the rate for a flag person, and the rate for a police officer is no appreciable difference. It was going to save some money somewhere, and it's not.
Thank you to the chair for those get into a policy debate, but I have certainly been in conversations with many community members, particularly who are negatively impacted by over-policing, who absolutely are asking for a reduction in the size of the police force and a reduction in interactions with police in the community. And, you know, I don't want to get into a policy debate, but the people who are asking for that are primarily the people who are negatively impacted by the current system. And of course, it's not surprising that people who are wealthy and privileged enough not to be bothered by it are perhaps not so concerned with it.